Hey BookTube. Um, Today I just wanted to talk about some books I've gotten in the past few months. I haven't made a video since July 2022, I think, something like that. And in that time, I've gotten rid of a lot of books. I've gotten a lot of books, and in today's video, I wanted to just go over a few of those books that I've gotten, and hopefully they'll be of interest to some people. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Um, the first work I got was this Giorgio Vasari, The Lives of the Artists, Sculptors, and Architects. This work, for those who are unfamiliar with Vasari, this work is basically the Renaissance itself. This is the Renaissance. Vasari was tasked by, I can't remember the Pope, it was one of the popes at the time, had tasked Vasari to write uh, uh, biographies of the great artists of the time period of the Renaissance. And so Vasari took up the task with great labor and wrote sort of Plutarch style, in a way, biographies of the eminent artists of the time. And and the way that Vasari divides this work up is, if I'm not mistaken, I've only read small portions here and there, the biographies of Da Vinci and Raphael and whatnot. But the whole work uh, is sort of divided, I believe, into like a Bronze Age of artists, a Silver Age of artists, and a Golden Age of artists. And the culmination of all these artists, the hero of this book is Michelangelo. Giorgio Vasari's uh, hero is Michelangelo. He believes Michelangelo to be the greatest of them all. And and I'm very glad to have found this. I found this for a pretty good price. I think I got this for around $40, which is pretty good given the quality of the books and the box set. This is the unabridged Vasari. Vasari is mostly just abridged. Penguin abridges him in 2 volumes. Oxford University Press does, or Oxford Classics does it in 1 volume, I think. And they mostly just, they sort of chop them up a bit and then just pull out, Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Donatello, Cellini, um, the more known artists. But this is the whole work. So I believe there's like artists in here whose work does not survive at all. All we have is the testimony of Vasari, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so yeah, I'm really happy to have this on my shelf. I watched a documentary earlier this year, I think last month. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's 2 episodes. Each is an hour long, but it's one documentary. It's from the BBC. It was done 12 years ago, something like that. And it's titled Travels with Vasari, in which the host sort of pulls his copy of Vasari off the shelf and travels to Florence and Venice and sort of walks through these art galleries with Vasari as he's describing them, standing in front of paintings that Vasari himself saw. And it was fantastic. If I can remember, I'll put it in the description of this video for those interested. It's fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. One qualm is that since it was uploaded a while ago, it's not in the best quality. It's like 360p or something, but you're not paying any money to see it. So, yeah. And then another thing I wanted to talk about is I'm just curious if anyone else does anything similar to me in regards to looking at a time period. But when it comes to the Renaissance, the first time I got into reading about the Renaissance, reading writers from the Renaissance, was a few years ago. The first time I studied the Renaissance on my own was just through the lens of Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci. I was, completely captivated by him, as you cannot help but be. And I was studying his life and times and people he was talking to and all that. And then eventually I peeled away from the Renaissance and I went to go read about other things. And then a little while later, I'd say probably half a year later, I came back to the Renaissance, but I was interested in a whole other aspect of the Italian Renaissance, and that was the epic poetry. So Dante's Commedia, Luigi Pulci, Boiardo, Ariosto, Torquato Tasso, I was really interested in the epic poets, and then and only that. No interest in the painters. No interest in any of the other writers or statesmen. And then eventually I veered away. And then I came back again to the Renaissance. I got all of a sudden interested in the Renaissance again, and I was interested in the historians of the time. So just to really, I don't really know much about the lesser historians, but Machiavelli, the Florentine histories, and also the discourses on Livy, but that's more political philosophy. And then Francesco Guicciardini, the history of Italy. And I was only interested in those things. And then again, I veered off to different subjects. I'm coming back around to the Renaissance, and I'm interested in Leonardo and a whole lot more. So I'm very happy to have this. I don't think I'll be reading the whole of this year. Um, I don't. I might do something pretty stupid and just, at least stupid in my opinion is, well, I shouldn't call it stupid, but I'm not a big fan of abridgments, and I try when I can to read a work in the way that an author intended. So, like an example I can give is Plutarch. I read The Parallel Lives, and I read it in one go um, over the course of a few months. I took my time, and I read it as in the way that Plutarch intended. You have the Greek, you have the Roman, and then you have the immediate essay following. And I did that as opposed to what Penguin and Oxford do, which is just, you pull out a few lives of that deal with the end of the Roman Republic. So Mark Antony, Caesar, Marius, Sulla, and you put that in a volume and you just read those. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it the way Plutarch intended, and I think my experience reading the Parallel Lives was much greater because of it, as opposed to reading them chopped up. You're walking through the entirety of antiquity with Plutarch. It's fantastic, and to hear his thought-provoking meditations on comparing a Greek or a Roman historical figure, it's just fantastic, and I loved it, and I should be reading this in the way that Vasari intended. You got it, because it's all culminating to Michelangelo, but I don't know if I'm so interested in the artists of the time period, but am I interested enough to read the much lesser known artists right now? I don't know. I'd have to be a lot more interested. I'm mostly interested in the big ones like Raphael and Donatello and whatnot. But anyway, not enough. I've been talking about this too long. But regardless of what I just said, I'm very happy to have this on my shelf. This will be a permanent mainstay. So yeah, that's the first work. Let's see. The next work, I found out about this book on a booktube. A few booktubers who I love have all talked about this book and have all said the same thing, and that this book is amazing. It's fantastic. It's there's a revelation on every page, and it's this. It's the Christianity, the first 3,000 years. Huge book. I've been meaning to really examine the history of Christianity because of its enormous impact on the world and history, but I just haven't done that yet. My interest right now is mostly in the early days of the church, the first 200 years of Christianity, mostly in relation to the Roman Empire, first 200, 300 years, and particular interest in the 4th century AD with Julian the Apostate. Very much interested in learning more about him. And I plan on reading this year the Chronicle of the Church by Archbishop Eusebius, as well as his, I believe, unfinished biography of Constantine the Great. And then I plan on reading another work by, it's a more modern work. It's from the author's name is Judith something. It begins with an H. And the book's titled The Formation of Christendom. I think Princeton University Press currently publishes it. And that's just sort of about the early days of Christianity. So right where I'm interested in. So yeah, but anyway, I got this book. I'm very much looking forward to reading the early sections, but just given what I've heard, I'm sure I'll just charge right along and just go right to the end of this. So Yeah, the Christianity, the first 3,000 years. Um, let's see here. I got the next book is this. It's A Country Doctor by Sarah Orne Jewett. Um, I've been meaning to read more writers of New England. I love New England literature. I've read a lot of Emerson and Thoreau. Um, Not as much Nathaniel Hawthorne as I should be reading. I should read a lot more Hawthorne. I've hardly read any of him. Um, I don't think I was ever assigned The Scarlet Letter or The House of the Seven Gables in school. And even if I was assigned it, I probably would have just spark noted it. So I'm looking forward to reading those eventually. But Sarah Orne Jewett, I'm interested in. I think from what I know about her, I've heard it said that she was a member of Boston's cultural elite in like the latter half of the 1800s. Um, and so that interests me. And also, I first found out about her a few years ago, uh, because of the director of the 2019 film The Lighthouse, which is one of my favorite movies in the last few years. I really love that film. Um, I was actually fortunate enough to go to a showing of the film in which uh, Robert Eggers did a Q&A in the theater right after. So the movie finished, said directed by Robert Eggers, and I turned around. He was 3 feet behind me. Not even kidding. It was pretty surreal. But anyway, when he was talking about writing a script for that movie, which takes place off the coast of Maine in the 1890s, he said that he referred to Sarah Orne Jewett's work while writing because she sort of phonetically captures the the sound of the northern Maine dialect of the time period. And I love the language of the film, and I so yeah, that has me very much interested in Sarah Orne Jewett as a writer. Not just this work, but in all of her works. She wrote a work called the Country of the Pointed Firs. I've been keeping my eye out for a copy of that. I know Penguin publishes this now, but I know they used to publish they published a volume titled "The Country of the Pointed Firs and Other Stories." They don't do it anymore, I don't think, but they used to. Hopefully, I'll find that. But also, I think that she's in the Library of America. There's a volume of her in the Library of America, so maybe I'll get that. We'll see. But yeah, Sarah Orne Jewett, A Country Doctor. Um, okay, going back, have I talked about the ancient world yet? No, not really. I got this book. It's the Cambridge Ancient History, the Assyrian Empire. And then on the cover there, you have a Neo-Assyrian king. I think that's Tiglath-Pileser, Ashurbanipal, something like that. I'm not really sure. I I haven't spent really any time studying the Assyrians. I've spent a majority of my time studying the Romans, the Greeks, and the Persians. Studied them for pretty extensively. I've read a lot of the primary sources, but the Assyrians, hardly spent any time, and I've been meaning to correct that. And I originally got this book because, for those who don't know, the Cambridge Ancient History is a huge series. I think it originally came out in the 1920s, something like that, 1930s. And I think at the time then it was like 12 or 13 volumes. Now it's more than that. But it's the Cambridge Ancient History covers from basically all the way to the earliest days of mankind up until the end of antiquity, so like around 6th, 7th century AD. And they're not like, this book is not written by one author. It's a collection of chapters written by leading scholars in the field. So this work it's called the Assyrian Empire, but there's all these writers in here, and they're covering all aspects of this time period. So you'll get chapters on agrarian life, warfare, literature, statesmen, politics, government, all that stuff will be in here. It's all aspects of this time period. And it doesn't just cover the Assyrians. The last 100, 150 pages, I think, cover the Greek world from the 8th to 6th century BC. Sort of in that era of you'll get like the reforms of Solon in here. You'll get the expansion of the Greek colonies. So that's why I originally got this. But all the Assyrian stuff in here is a plus. And I've been meaning to study more about the transition period between the Assyrians and the Persians, sort of the what was going on in the air when Cyrus the Great began his campaigns. That's sort of what I'm interested in. So I got this work, and um, I won't be reading this straight through. This will be, I'll dip in and out, and just I'll read a chapter here and there. I have other volumes right there. You can see that's volume 10. That's the Augustan Empire. I have volume 4 right there. That's titled the Cambridge, or that's titled the Persian Empire in the West. And then there's one right here on Macedonia. That covers the 4th century BC. I also have more down here on uh, the uh, the High Empire, which was following the Augustan era, and then like late antiquity and its successors and all that stuff. Crisis of Empire, all that. So yeah, it's a great series. I love this. So I'm very happy to find this. I found this for very cheap too. These things can get really expensive. If you want to buy these new, they're like $300, but I found this for like $6. So yeah, quite a steal. Sticking with themes of antiquity, we have Agesilaus and the Crisis of Sparta by Paul Cartledge. This came out in 1987, and it covers the life of King Agesilaus, who's one of the kings of Sparta, and his time period, because Agesilaus became one of the kings of Sparta in 400 BC, which, if you do the math, was right about the time that Spartans were at the height of their power. Just 4 years previous to that, they were victorious over the Athenians in an event known as the Peloponnesian War, and so Agesilaus came to power in the years following that, when Sparta was the established power. Athens had been defeated and subdued. Sparta had humiliatingly had the long walls of Athens destroyed. The walls going from the city to the Piraeus, which was the Athenian seaport and sort of the center of their sea power. So when Agesilaus, as I just said, came to power, Sparta was at the height of its power, and then by the end of his reign, when he died in 360 BC, Sparta was a shadow of its former glory. In fact, such a shadow that Agesilaus, who was at one point the most powerful man in the Greek world, at the end of his life, in his 80s, he was 84 years old, and he was fighting as a mercenary soldier in Egypt to like raise money for Sparta. He was fighting for an Egyptian ruler named, it begins with an N. It's like Necto something. Oh, I can't remember it. But the Egyptians were sort of fighting off the yoke of Persian dominion at the time, and Agesilaus went and fought there. And he died on the way back from Egypt in 360 BC. This time period fascinates me because, well, in the 390s BC, Agesilaus tried to, he wanted to lead a Greek expedition, a sort of a Hellenic crusade against Persia in the 390s, I think starting in 398, 396, sometime around there, in sort of the name of liberating the Greek cities in Asia, in the Near East, on the coast there, the Ionian cities, but then he was in Asia Minor for 2 years, sort of campaigning. He had some interactions with the satrap Pharnabazus. Very interesting figure. Him and the other one, Tissaphernes. I don't know if that's the exact pronunciation of his name, but the western satrapies of Persia. But Agesilaus had to be called back in 394 for an event. There was a conflict known as the Corinthian War. And so he never really got to realize his dream of fighting this great war against Persia. And then while he was king in 371 BC, the Spartans lost at the Battle of Leuctra to the Thebans of all people, which was a shock and an upset to the Greek world. Upset in that it was totally unsuspected. It had a huge psychological impact because it was the first time in living memory that the Spartans had lost in the field. It hadn't happened since, like, I don't know, the 6th century BC, something like that, in one of the Mantinean Wars, something like that. No, one of the wars that began with an M. There was one city-state. I'm totally blanking right now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 371 BC, Spartans lose to the Thebans, and then they lose again in 362 BC, and to the Thebans again. And that 9-year period, 371 BC to 362 BC, is known as the Theban hegemony, which is very, very fascinating time period, and I wish there was more books about it, or more books in recent times. There was a book written in the 80s with that exact title. It's called The Theban Hegemony, 371 to 362 BC, by a man named John Buckler, or something like that. It was published by Harvard University Press. I've tried to get a copy, and they're like, I've never seen it go below $150. It's just absurd. At one point, it frustrates me deeply when a very interesting topic has only just a few, or in this case, one scholarly work about it, and it's just the price is so outlandish, you begin to feel like you're totally locked out of the information. But anyway, that's a whole side tangent. This time period fascinates me. It's all centered around this king, this book. Also, I'm interested in Agesilaus in his relation to the historian Xenophon. At the end of last year, I did a re-examination of Xenophon's histories, the Anabasis and the Hellenica, and really enjoyed it. I spent a whole month rereading him, as well as reading articles and books about Xenophon and his time. And Xenophon was an Athenian, but he was sort of like a Spartan. He's characterized as sort of a Spartan fanboy in a way, and he was a sort of a hero worshiper of Agesilaus, and Agesilaus was his friend and his benefactor. So that relationship between the two of them interests me deeply. Anyway, I've been talking about this book for way too long. I'm very happy to have this. I actually got this for relatively cheap. This thing usually, I was watching prices of this book for a while. I think it was like 90. I saw it in the 90s to the 130s, and then someone posted this copy for $30, and it's in excellent condition, and I jumped on it immediately. So, and it's actually not the only book I have on the subject. I have another book here, Agesilaus and the Failure of Spartan Hegemony. And that was written a few years after. That was in 1991. That book came out. Does not seem as extensive and thorough. The book, the Agesilaus and the Crisis of Sparta, has a lot of untranslated Greek words in it, so it's definitely one of those more scholarly historical books. But nonetheless, I'm very happy to have it. The next book I have is this. It's Helen Waddell, a biography by D. Corrigan. I first heard about Helen Waddell about, I want to say, about a year and a half ago. I was talking to a friend of mine about the medieval era. I can't remember specifically what, but we were talking about, I think, medieval literature, and then that friend mentioned this work, The Wandering Scholars by Helen Waddell. And this work is about the Latin lyric as a literary form and its practitioners in the 12th century. And Helen Waddell translated this work. It's called Medieval Latin Lyrics. And so Helen wrote this book about these sort of wandering poets, these scholars singing in Latin, writing these sort of ballads of love and foolishness and whatnot, and then she translated this as well. And so I've had this for a while. So anyway, my friend told me about that, and I sort of kept it in the back of my mind because it sounded so interesting. And then I saw this earlier this summer, or not this summer, I mean last summer, and I jumped on it immediately. And then I also found this as well, her translations. That's sort of, these sort of kind of go together, if I'm not mistaken. So anyways, I've had this, haven't read them. I've dipped my toe into the Wandering Scholars, and I found the writing to be absolutely excellent. And then I was in a bookstore a few weeks ago, and it was one of those smaller bookstores where like every flat surface has a book on it. It's just overflowing with books, and there's like these book towers on the floor, um, and and the shelves, all the bookshelves are like double stacked. And so I was going through the history shelves, and I was trying to get a look at the back row of books. So I was pulling out the front row and I was sort of peering in just to see what was there. I remember I pulled out the first row of books and I saw this spine and I gasped. I was like, "There's a book on Helen Waddell? There's a biography?" So I kind of freaked out in the bookstore, um, and so yeah, I have this now. Just totally random. I found, I had no idea it existed. And when I eventually get around to reading the totality of the Wandering Scholars and her translations of the medieval Latin lyrics, I'll read this as well. From the very little I know about her life, it's fascinating. She was actually born in Tokyo to missionary parents. I don't remember what year. What year was that? Uh, doesn't doesn't say. I mean, I won't dig for it, but sometime in the early 20th century, something like that. I'm guessing. But yeah, I'm very happy I found this. Just totally random. So yeah, and that's that. Um, the next one is this work, "The Discovery and Conquest of Peru" by Pedro de Cieza de Leon, Chronicles of the New World Encounter. So last year, I read The Discovery and Conquest of Mexico by the conquistador Bernal Diaz. I actually talked about him in a video at the beginning of 2022. So I was saying that I wanted to read him. I did end up reading him at the end of last year. And his work is also translated as The Conquest of New Spain. And that was my first sort of foray into the world of the conquistadors, at least on my own. I remember studying them briefly in school, but this is the first time I read about them on my own. And I found Diaz's account of being a conquistador under Hernan Cortez to be absolutely thrilling and engrossing and horrifying and at times enraging. I mean, pretty enraging on the whole. But just to, sorry, there's a siren going by. Sorry about that. Okay, and but it was just fascinating, and defies description. The whole story of Hernan Cortez and Montezuma and the fall of the Aztecs. It's just an unbelievable historical event. And following that, I wanted to learn more about the Aztecs, but I realized I should go further south in the continent and learn about the Incas of Peru and Atahualpa and Pizarro. And I found out about this book, this author. I had to search this book out. This book was published by Duke University Press. I had to pay a little bit of money to get this, but it's a beautiful hardcover. And this was written, I don't really know much about the biography of Pedro de Cieza de Leon. I don't know if he served under Pizarro or anything like that, but I know that this is a relatively contemporary work of history. I have to brush up on my facts in regards to this, but when I start learning about the Incas, I'll probably start here. So yeah, very happy to have this. The next book, we're going back up. We're going north now, back to the Aztecs. I found this, the Codex Mendoza, Aztec manuscript. I found this a few days after finishing Bernal Diaz, and it was just, this showed up in my local bookstore. I had no idea this book existed, and let me read you the back here. The Aztec painted manuscript known as the Codex Mendoza was prepared on the authority of Don Antonio de Mendoza, first viceroy of New Spain, shortly after the Spanish conquest, for dispatch to the Emperor Charles V. The Codex was specially written by an Aztec painted book artist using the native pictographic system of writing, so that the Spanish monarch should be able to read it and form an idea of his strange dominions in the New World. And then later down on the back it says, the Codex Mendoza is one of the most remarkable and at the same time one of the most useful of the ancient Mexican manuscripts which have survived to modern times. Its particular importance lies in the fact that it is accompanied by a commentary written in Spanish by a contemporary on the basis of direct explanations and advice from the Aztecs themselves. The Aztecs themselves about the meaning of each detail in the manuscript. And then the further down here on the last line, it says, one can safely say that the Codex Mendoza is truly the key to the study of this period of Mexican history. Wow. Very lucky to have found this. I'm going to show you a few pictures inside. Let's see here. There you go. It looks like there's some warriors on there. The feather shields, yeah, there's a closer look. Let's see. Bear with me here. Let's get another good. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. The Aztecs in their own words. How cool is that? So yeah, I was very lucky to have found this. This actually, when I went to go find books about the Aztecs, this had actually gotten in the store earlier that day. So I'm very glad I was the first one to find this, or else someone else would have snatched this up immediately. So yeah, it definitely seems like a book. If you're interested in the Aztecs, it seems like something worth finding. I have no idea if this is still in print. I have not checked about prices online. For context, if anyone's interested in looking for this, this was sold to me for $20 by the bookstore. So this looks like something that price would probably be upscaled online. That's just my guess. But yeah. So the next work here is a little different. This is the Malay Archipelago by Alfred Russel Wallace. Look at that cover. That penguin. That's awesome. I've been I'm really interested in the history of science, any science really, all aspects of science. I believe it was called natural philosophy in that time period of the 19th century. And Alfred Russel Wallace he's lesser known, but he's known as the co-discoverer of evolution. He, independently of Darwin, at the exact same time, he started to get this notion of an idea of evolution by means of natural selection. And if I'm not mistaken, Alfred Russel Wallace had published, I can't remember what year it was. Was it 1859? I don't know my dates right for this. He published a paper sort of alluding to this idea, and then Darwin read it and realized, oh my God, I have to get my idea out here before him. So he wrote The Origin of Species with due haste because Darwin realized that Alfred Russel Wallace was onto the same idea. And I haven't read Darwin yet, which is not good. I should read Darwin. I should read all of the evolutionary writings and The Voyage of the Beagle and all that, and biography of him. Haven't done that yet. My interest hasn't led me there yet, but my interest has led me to Alfred Russel Wallace. He does really interest me right now. This is definitely on the higher part of my reading priority list at this moment. Let me read you. I'll read you the back here. It says just about this work. Alfred Russel Wallace left to explore the islands of Southeast Asia, an obscure naturalist. He returned 8 years later an acclaimed scientist and co-discoverer of the theory of evolution. This is his vivid, exhilarating, and heroic account of his travels across the entire Malay world, from Singapore to the western edges of New Guinea. With exploratory zeal and lyrical brilliance, he describes battling through jungles, enduring seasickness and fever, meeting headhunters, marveling at birds of paradise, and collecting countless new species as he made discoveries that changed our view of the world. And then there's a quote from Sir David Attenborough at the bottom. And it says, one of the most adventurous, observant, and honorable scientists of his time. And then the quote Penguin puts on the back here from the work is, Alfred Russel Wallace writes, I slept very comfortably with half a dozen smoke-dried human skulls suspended over my head. All right, I definitely want to read this. So, yeah, but anyway, Everything I've read about Alfred Russel Wallace just interests me so deeply. I want to learn more about him. I'll probably read this and then read a biography of him this year. So yeah, that's that. Look at that penguin. That is awesome. I found out about this book. I only knew that this was a penguin when because of the Penguin Classics book, which I think I've shown on my channel. I saw this cover in the book and I was like, what is that? I sought this book out and I got it a few years later. I've never seen anyone hold up this copy. I've never seen this copy in a bookstore. I would have had no idea this existed unless it was if it weren't for that book, I guess. So yeah, pretty cool. That's one of the more unique penguin covers. And then the next one here, this is the most recent buy. It's this, the translations of Seamus Heaney. Just came out last week. I think it came out in the UK in the end of 2022, but it just came out in the US last week. And I have a confession to make. I have never read Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf. I can hear you all recoiling in horror as I speak. I was assigned Beowulf in senior year of high school English class. I remember talking about it in class. And I cannot for the life of me remember if I read Beowulf or if I spark noted Beowulf. I have no idea. And if I did read Beowulf, I'd have no clue what the translation was. And so I've gotten this book and I've been thinking about Seamus Heaney, I've been thinking about Beowulf, and I've been starting to realize, have I ever read Beowulf? I know the story, I know it happens. I've read Grendel twice, and I love Grendel. But I don't know if I've read Beowulf, so that'll be what I go into first with this book. I'll be reading his translation of Beowulf. I feel so embarrassed right now admitting that I probably haven't read Beowulf. Oh my God. I'm going to read Beowulf, and then Seamus Heaney translated book 6 of the Aeneid, and he translated, I can't remember which play of Sophocles, but he translated Sophocles, and I'll probably read that as well. I don't know if I'll read all this in one go, but yeah, books centered around one translator. That's a really interesting concept. Has that been done before? Does anyone know of any books like this of different translators? This would be a really cool concept to do for other translators, I think. So yeah, that's it. That's the books I wanted to talk about. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I plan on making more videos this year. I only made a few in 2022, and I've missed making videos, and I don't have a set schedule for this year, but I have a few ideas. I have one that's going to come out much sooner rather than later. There's no set date. I don't want to make any promises, but it'll be much sooner than when comparing the gaps between videos on my channels previously. It'll be probably in another month, maybe less, maybe a little more, something like that. And then I'm planning on making longer form videos, like the video I did on Herodotus. I really enjoyed making that video, just really going in depth about either an author or a subject that I love, talking about multiple books in relation to that subject or author. So yeah, anyways, all right.